Okay. So my understanding is the first person to kick off the session. The presenter is Wendy. Wendy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So Wendy, welcome and thank you for kicking this off. So I'm going to make you the presenter now. And so you should see on your screen all the buttons, the slide under the slide, so you can actually move the slides by clicking left or right. So okay, and people, everybody, you can actually maximize your screen. So if you look at the top right hand corner of your computer screen, you'll see a button that says maximize. So you can actually press that and you'll have a full view of the screen. Okay, so on to you, Wendy.
Okay. It says if your speaker's next. If you're
So you can begin presenting, Wendy.
Okay. I've just got a box on the. It says now we will test your speaker, so I'll cancel that. And I should be able to advance. You said?
Yeah, you should see the slide button at the bottom of the screen, a little arrow left and right.
Yes. Is it blue? It says preview slide.
That's right. So click on the right side arrow, and it'll move forward.
I do see that. Well, thank you, Michelle. Welcome to our Bangladesh team, and our Canadian team are here to present a webinar about branding and marketing, communication and marketing plans. So I get to do the first 1 to 10 slides, and then our partner Dan Doran will take over and do the remaining 10. I'm going to speak as clearly and slowly as possible. If there's any questions pertaining to the slide that I'm on from our Bangladesh partners, I think a message or a question in the chat box would suffice. If you don't get a chance to ask the question during the chat, please write it down and we can certainly address it later as well. So without further ado, I will begin. Perfect. So in communication, it takes obviously two parties. It needs somebody who's speaking and someone who's receiving information. So in the spirit of communication, you have to know who you are talking to. And when you're sending a message in your society about what you're doing, what is your mission, and what is it that you are wanting to, what is the message that you're wanting to send? You need to know who you are talking to. So identifying your audience is very, very important. We've given you some examples here of an audience that you may be speaking to. With hemophilia, the caregivers, patients with hemophilia and related bleeding disorders, family, healthcare workers, decision and policy makers, volunteers, and more. So you need to know and you need to decide for yourself who is your audience. So any questions about this slide? Okay, I'll move on. So we've taken a lot of our information from our own communication and branding education from CHS. And we've tried to create a presentation to you that comes from where we began as well. So our audiences consist of an external and an internal. So we suggest that HSB look at their external audiences and their internal audiences. So what is an external audience? An external audience are the audience outside of the bleeding disorder disorders community. That means the people that are maybe in your public, people who may not know about bleeding disorders, people that may not understand hemophilia, people that you would want to engage or draw into your society for support. Those people would be your external audience. So who is your internal audience? Well, those people would be the people within your hemophilia community. That would consist of patients with hemophilia or related bleeding disorders, of patients with hemophilia or related bleeding disorders. Anybody that is connected to the patient with the bleeding disorder, including HSB volunteers, including healthcare workers. Is there any questions there? Okay. So, there are two plans then. If we stay on the same theme of external and internal, you're talking to your public, you need a communication plan for people in the public eye, in the general population. Then you will need a communication plan within your internal audience, which would be your hemophilia and bleeding disorders patients and all of the support around them. So that's two types of plans that you will need for communication and two approaches. So, how do you do that? And what do you say? Those are the things that you will need to think about what you want to say to your public. What is it that HSB as a society wants to say, and how are you going to say that? There's some really great things happening in HSB, including your website. Have an opportunity to look at. So that's a very great external or an example of an external communication plan. So how do you communicate to patients and families? Well, obviously you talk within your society. How are you going to engage? If it's anything like what we experience in Canada with our patients and our families and our people with bleeding disorders, we have a team around them. Do you have a team in Bangladesh? Besides family, your healthcare workers, how do you communicate between each other? And that needs to be decided. Some of it comes naturally, some of it has to be worked at as well. Is there any questions about the communication plan? External, again, on the same theme of external, meaning your public. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve when you're speaking to your public about bleeding disorders, about hemophilia care? What do you want your audience to know about you if you were going to speak to somebody who's never heard of a bleeding disorder? What are you going to say? How do you make them aware of the bleeding disorder? How do you make them aware about what they might be seeing with a person with a bleeding disorder? How do you, in the next piece, how do you generate support? How do you get people to support you? Do you share stories? Do you share pictures? Do you do presentations in schools? How do you generate volunteer involvement? Do you do all of those things that I've mentioned above? How do you do that? HSB has to look at what their communication goals are and what they want to achieve and decide Is there any questions there? Again, in the same theme of our external and internal, so you have your patient and with bleeding disorders, or your internal communication goals would be to your internal audience. And within that audience, when you're speaking to patients with the bleeding disorders and their families, and all of the support network around them, including the societies and the volunteers and the health care workers, how do you provide support and education to that community, to the smaller community? How do you connect with them? What are your goals to connect with them? How do you generate volunteer involvement within that smaller circle? My guess would be that it would be easier to get volunteers because people are already connected to the bleeding disorders and they may understand. So they may be your best volunteers. All of your volunteers, all the people that are doing your work are all volunteers. But engaging the people that are in the bleeding disorder community and linked to the person with the bleeding disorder, it would be easier, obviously, to get them to volunteer. So how are you going to do that really well? And is there an opportunity for financial support within the community? And that's something for Bangladesh to decide. Or I'm sure you already know. So, again, your website does a lot. And your website is very easily accessible. When I went to Google it, I just put hemophilia Bangladesh and it popped right out. It was an excellent way to communicate the goals. So here's some examples of external target audiences. Volunteers, active donors, governments, media, suppliers of goods and services, other health charities. Is there any questions so far? You need to decide amongst your team, the HSB team, how your priorities are. These are just examples, but you decide what your list will look like. Again, for your internal target audience, as I've already mentioned before, it would be your people with hemophilia and related bleeding disorders, family, friends, people with hemophilia, your healthcare professionals, your volunteers, chapters, hemophilia societies around the world. So these would be people already engaged with bleeding disorders or attached to bleeding disorders because it is a part of their life. Any questions there? So again, prioritize your list according to what you think your priorities are for your internal audiences. I have a question from Eric Stolte, and it says, so pharma would be considered external? Yes, we discussed pharma, Eric, and it would be considered external. However, in our discussion, it was not decided, but the actual involvement of pharma and how much Bangladesh has access to pharmaceuticals was a question. So that might also be a question for Bangladesh to explore sometime in the future if there was any thought of the use of pharmaceuticals. Does that answer your question? So communication. How are you going to spread the message? And I think this is going to be about your message. So our HSB team, we looked at your HSB mission statement, and this mission statement was just not developed, but it was polished or finished or just reworded in the last few months, according to the action plan that just took place over the summer. I'm not mistaken. So your mission statement is a strong one, has lots of information, and a mission statement drives what you do, and it's a very, very important statement, because at any time when you feel like you are scattered or you have too many questions coming at you and there's too many things to do, your mission statement will ground you and help you focus about what you're going to be doing in your society. I'm going to read your mission statement because it's a strong one. So HSB's mission statement is to provide information, education, training, awareness, and advice for proper care to people with hemophilia and related bleeding disorders, and to advocate for greater access to treatment options. So those are wonderful goals in your mission statement. And any time you want to know what message to spread and how you're going to spread those messages, start with looking at your mission statement, and it will help you figure that out. Now, the second piece of that is your vision. And HSB's vision is to take care of all people with hemophilia and related bleeding disorders, to alleviate pain and suffering and be disability free. Those are two important pieces. If somebody asks you, what are you doing as the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh? That's your vision. That's what you want to do. How are you going to spread that message? Any questions there? Moving on. So this is my last slide, and Dan will be taking over after this one. How do you communicate? We had quite a bit of fun trying to figure out how Bangladesh communicates. We have phones, and phones that are attached to a landline in our home. We have cell phones. And we talk and we text. We assume Bangladesh has the same. Computers, iPads, tablets. Do you have all of those things? Television, radio. Seems like you would, and that would be something that's sort of universal. But that's for something that Bangladesh to look at. Newspapers, newsletters, mail. These are all modes of communication. Communication also involves local displays in public places, in schools, in hospitals, clinics. How is your information there? It may not have to be somebody sitting at a table speaking. Are your resources available? Can someone pick something up and read it? Where are you putting those resources? Are they in places that people sit and read? Do you have places where people wait where they can sit and read? Do you use social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Well, we know you use Skype, instant messaging on your smartphone, any media phone. All of these are modes of communication that are very, very effective in communicating. And for Bangladesh, and similar to Canada, there are pockets or places in Canada, like it would be in Bangladesh, where a lot of phones may not work and services are limited. So how do you communicate in rural, remote areas? What are your best modes of communication there? So anything communicated the way that it's communicated. Maybe in the remote areas, mail is your only way to get information there, or a newsletter, or a newspaper, or radio. For Bangladesh, you have to figure that out for your whole population. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Dan. Is there any questions to this point from anybody before we do that?
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Wendy. So I'll ask Wendy to just go back on mute by doing *4, and I'll ask Dan to unmute himself by doing *4, and I will pass the control to Dan in 1 second. There we go, Dan. So you should be able now to move the slides on and off. So Dan, are you online now and on the phone?
Yes, I am. I'm just going to get set up here.
Okay, please stand by, everybody, while Dan is taking control.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, I think it's good, Dan.
Okay. So, thank you, Wendy. That was great. So I'm going to pick up a bit and finish the presentation with the last part of it. And Wendy just left off on what type of communication tools would be most effective to be used in Bangladesh. And so further to that, some of our key messages to our external audiences, you want to have some common themes and some common messages. And here are some examples. So for instance, in other structured hemophilia societies and Canada, we use statements like, we're all related by blood. Help stop the bleeding. There is no cure yet, but there may be soon, someday. Hemophilia is, or hemophilia is not. You may have a clear message there you want to send to your external partners regarding how you describe hemophilia. You may have a bleeding disorder. You are not alone. Another key message. People with bleeding disorders need your support to fully reach their potential. This is how you can help. Bleeding disorders affect people's quality of life. And good health care saves public dollars. So these are all very important messages. And they're messages that should be well-defined, messages that should be understood, but simple, enough for your external partners, your external audience, to be able to grasp fairly quickly at a glance. So these are just some examples, and for the Bangladesh Hemophilia Society, maybe some of these are more relevant than others at this stage in your development. So we would suggest that maybe you select a couple of these and discuss them and decide what is the optimal communication message, the best communication message you would like to send to your external audience. So key messages to government, and government is another example of an external audience. And government is very important in most countries in order to forward the goals and objectives of a hemophilia society. And I think it will be important as well in Bangladesh. So what are the messages to government that you want to be clear? Well, one of the best ones is your Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh activities can lead to better care. Quality care can save healthcare dollars. So whenever government is looking at maybe supporting you or investing in healthcare for every investment, it may save more money down the road. So that's a very important message. Your support has meant, and this is more telling the government just how much you appreciate and what it has done for your clientele. Your leadership is important in building volunteer services, and that's very important. It's another key structure, another key component of a successful society. We discussed this when Michelle and I were visitors in Bangladesh and Dhaka, how important volunteer services will be to spreading and growing your chapter and the development. Volunteer health organizations are valuable partners. So outside government or within government, health organizations that are voluntary, that just simply function on a voluntary basis, they will be important allies, important partners to help the Bangladesh Hemophilia Society grow its programs. So what are the key messages external to media? And this is people that may give you some free publicity in newspapers, television, on radio, maybe even on social media. So you want to be very clear about what type of message you want to convey. This is what we do. That's very important. You have to clearly understand in a simple form how to send that message to all your important media contacts. What do you do? What do you stand for? Wendy touched on that a little earlier. There is no cure, but we're working on it. Once again, that's a fairly common statement these days. We need your support to create awareness. That's once again telling media how important they are to your society and the growth of your society. We work for the benefit of all those with bleeding disorders. That's a very important statement as well. You're not exclusive. Everyone with a bleeding disorder, you're working for their benefit. And we speak with one voice. That means that your communication messages are clear and all your alliances, all your partners are in line with that message, that everyone speaks with one voice. Feel free to type in any questions in your chat box, but I'm just going to proceed, and I'll be watching that if there's any questions. And maybe at the end we can have a good discussion about the slide presentation, and maybe then you'll have a few more things to talk about. So what would you want the country to know about you? That's an important statement. Before you send out your message, you have to develop it. You have to say, what does the general population, how do you want to tell them about your hemophilia and related bleeding disorders? So another strategic partner, external audience, is corporations and foundations. And does Bangladesh have corporations and foundations that would support, financially support, and donate financial resources to the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh? Does this message apply? Do you have any of those possibilities now to reach out to corporations and foundations in Bangladesh? This may not be a priority for you right now if that one is relatively low on your scale of importance. But certainly something for the future to look look at. So examples of key messages to internal audiences, and as Wendy explained earlier, our internal audience is usually our clientele and the people that we work directly with to deliver that healthcare service, our care and treatment of hemophilia. So some examples of key messages that we want to keep in mind is, the future is bright with respect to research and care. So that's still staying optimistic, that we will always keep looking forward to a cure especially those in remote areas of Bangladesh. They have to take control of their own care, no matter how minimal it is or how advanced it is. Knowledge is power. That means you should be encouraging your clientele to know everything they can about their bleeding disorder so they know how to speak about it well to healthcare professionals and anyone else that might be in a position to help them. You are not alone. That is a key message that's very supportive. There's a lot of stigma around hemophilia. A lot of people feel that they don't want to talk about it, especially if they have a disability. Many people become isolated at home. But the key message here is when you send that out to your clientele is you are not alone. We share what you're going through. We have people who are exactly in the same position as you are. You have great potential. That's another statement that we have to constantly reinforce with people with bleeding disorders and hemophilia. That no matter what the state of their disability, you still have the potential to go out and live a better life. Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh is your organization. It is, and that's a powerful statement in the sense that it creates ownership. It doesn't belong to doctors or other healthcare professionals. It doesn't belong to an executive. It is your organization, and you can contribute to that, and you can benefit from that. The Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh can help improve your quality of life. That's a very important message as well. You're telling them that we can do something for you that you're not getting now. Join your chapter and be active. A critical message to send out to your internal audience. It's important that you foster that sense of volunteerism in order to move forward. So once you help one person or one family, what you're telling them is you want them to in turn give back and help others and help your chapter or help your society. You want them to be active. You want them to attend meetings if they can. You want their skills and their commitment. We need to build networks at all levels, and that's very important. This isn't you can't be a top-down driven organization. In order to be bottom-up, you need to develop a number of networks at all levels, the government level, the healthcare professional level, the client level, and those networks all have to communicate and interact with each other. We need people to connect with their peers, other people that are in the same position as them, that have a bleeding disorder or maybe even have similar joint issues or disabilities. We must encourage them to meet, family weekends, communicate by phone, however they can connect. It's very important that people talk to each other and support each other. And finally, we need to spread the word about hemophilia and all bleeding disorders. So that message to your internal audience just simply says, once you understand it well, you're encouraged to talk about it and spread the word around, because the more the general population knows about hemophilia and bleeding disorders, the less mystery there is about it, and the more chances are that you will receive more financial benefits and health care. So some other examples of powerful internal messages are the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh is there for you too. And I touched on that earlier, but it's an important message. Once again, creating that ownership that a person with a bleeding disorder, we're letting them know that the society is there for them. The Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh complements the work of healthcare professionals in bleeding disorder clinics. So that networking, that communication, that relationship with healthcare professionals is critical. We want them to be informed. We want them to be messengers of our messages as well. We want them to be able to communicate well with our clients and give them the best healthcare possible. Society of Bangladesh is an accurate source of information. Once again, that's a critical message, that any communication to your internal clientele, that your information is accurate and current. The Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh produces many of the educational materials you receive. So once again, that message simply says to your internal clientele that we've developed this internally, and we send it out to you. This is what we're doing for you. We need to dispel myths and stigma around bleeding disorders. A very important message again, that overcoming that stigma, that constant need to stay away from the public because they're afraid people will cast judgment because they have a disability or that they have a bleeding disorder. That's not something that's healthy. We need people to talk about it openly. And the only way we can do that is communicate and discuss with everyone at every level. Your child is like every other child except, and this statement that we're telling them is, your child is perfectly normal. There's very few people in this world that don't have some type of health issue. So all we're saying is that your child simply has this bleeding disorder. But other than that, they have the capability to live a productive life and contribute to society. There are numerous support groups. So within every country, there are always volunteer support groups that can help. Your challenge there is to reach out and connect with those in the networking that we discussed earlier. The Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh is about families. It is all about families and individuals, but usually individuals have families. So people with bleeding disorders, it's not just about them. It's not just about hemophilia in one person. It's related to the whole family, the mother, the father, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles. That's what it's all about, communicating that broader message. And to ensure a bright future, we need your support. Once again, a critical message that in order for us to have success as a society in Bangladesh, we need your support, your voluntary support, your financial support. So what you should do here is look at these messages and choose a message or create, you can even create one of your own. These are just examples. But which messages really resonate with your society at its stage in development in Bangladesh? Are any of these more important than others? Are any of these messages very critical to your stage of development? So choose one or several of these, or even create your own. But when you get your own, stick with it and communicate it in all your communications. Some key messages to healthcare professionals in your internal audience. So your healthcare professionals, your nurses, your caregivers, your social workers, various other people that you're going to build together as a team to help people with hemophilia and bleeding disorders. And you want to communicate messages all the time that are positive. So some of these examples are, we need to work together. That's always a critical message. Some of these messages are fairly simple in nature, but they're important in the sense that we have to, in developing your communications plan, we need to state it on paper, and we need to state it verbally whenever we talk with people. We are partners in healthcare. We are partners in care. We're there to support you. This is what we do. So once again, all these messages are critically important to communicating what hemophilia is and what we can do to our internal and how we can support our internal audience, our healthcare professionals. Through the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh, you can break your isolation. And I think that is a very critical message, especially when we discussed stigma and the fact that people felt a sense of isolation through the general population in Bangladesh. We got to break through that isolation, and that message to healthcare professionals is critically important so that they can assist clients in communicating that. The Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh can help you be your best. So in support of your healthcare professionals, we want to say that when you work for us, whether you're a volunteer or a paid worker, we want to do everything we can to make sure that you deliver your best skills, that you enjoy working in healthcare, that you enjoy helping people with bleeding disorders and hemophilia. Hemophilia care should be the best it can be, and that is a profound statement that all societies around the world should strive for. We appreciate dedication, absolutely, and we should tell volunteers and our clients that all the time, and especially our healthcare professionals. Many of them go above and beyond a regular workday, so we have to tell them constantly that we appreciate what they're doing for us. And finally, we need to help our members communicate their needs. So our healthcare professionals can help our membership, our clients, open the lines of communication so that we know exactly what they need and they understand how they best can help them. So what is the status of healthcare professionals in Bangladesh currently? How can the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh involve healthcare professionals? So those are two key questions when you're developing your communications plan to your internal audience. You have to understand what the current state of healthcare professionals are and how we can engage more people to join. So a key message to encourage volunteers, and this is another critical component of your internal audience. I discussed volunteers a little earlier. It's what really makes every society around the world function efficiently. Your volunteers are people who are not paid, but have a sense of commitment because you've told them how important it is to work for the Bangladesh, to help people with bleeding disorders and hemophilia. So your key messages here constantly are, the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh appreciates you. We appreciate what you do. This is how you make a difference to our clientele, to people with bleeding disorders. And that's an important message. Without you, there is no Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh. And that's absolutely true. We need a lot of volunteers, and pretty well every society around the world has to rely on a good base of volunteers. The other thing is we have to tell them that the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh needs them. We need you. We need you as a volunteer, and we need you to help us. And then an extension of that is tell a friend about us. And that engages a wider audience. It reaches out to your neighbors, and maybe you can find people that have skill sets that will volunteer. And that's a key message. Tell a friend about the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh. Your message will mean that youth will follow. And youth are always a very critical component of our messaging to our clientele, both our volunteers, internal and external audiences. Youth are the future. And if we get them when they're young, they will have that sense of dedication and appreciation and stay with you through your society, through your chapters, for most of their life. And finally, teamwork matters. People have to work together. Strong personalities can't get in the way of developing your society and your chapters. So we really have to strive to put people that can work with each other in the right place and develop that sense of teamwork. These messages, while they're simple, they're quite universal. They're what really allows every modern hemophilia society around the world to function on a reliable basis, on a consistent basis, and develop their chapters and their societies for the future, not just for the present. So once again, those are messages. You can take them all or you can take part of them, but they should be incorporated into your communications plan for the benefit of others. Challenges. What are some of the challenges in Bangladesh that people with a bleeding disorder face? Well, I think we discussed a number of those. One of the main challenges is stigma. What do people think of someone with hemophilia? What do people, the general population, think of someone with a physical disability? How can we work towards, how can families cope with the stigma, the perception of the public? How can we be more open and honest about that so that people don't have that sense of fear and break down those barriers? What are the other challenges? And that's not something that any one chapter or society can answer. That's a very unique question for you people in Bangladesh. When you look at your building your society, what are your other main challenges that you're going to be dealing with? And those have to be clearly identified and addressed in your communications plan. That about summarizes our presentation. It looks to be a little simple, but it's very wise and knowledgeable in the sense that when you've addressed these slides and you put them all into your final document, it's an excellent communications tool for both your internal and your external audience. You want to build both, as Wendy stated earlier on. So that is it for my part of the presentation. I think now what we can do, we have a little bit of time. If there's any particular questions, we can open the floor to that. If not, I think, oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry, I didn't realize there was one more thing. So who is your audience? That's an important question that we started off with. Who are you targeting specifically? If more than one, which will you focus on first if you have multiple audiences? What is the most important one to address first and then later on? What are the key messages you need to communicate? And they may have been different than what we've presented in this slide presentation. So we urge you to have some debate about that internally. What are the best modes of communication in Bangladesh? We know our communications capabilities in Canada and elsewhere in the world. How does Bangladesh, given its geography, what is the best method of communication to reach a general audience in a cost-efficient manner? Overall, keep the mission and the vision of the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh at the forefront. Keep it simple and clear for people to be able to get and communicate easily with each other. So Wendy discussed the mission and the vision, and they're two very good statements. And we're really proud of those statements from the Hemophilia Society of Bangladesh. But you always have to keep those at the forefront. All your messages have to really derive from those two statements. And if we haven't said it before, we are very happy to be twinning partners with you. And this concludes our particular presentation. I really want to thank Marion and Milena and Wendy for their special work on developing these slides, and to you for listening as well. and getting back to my summary. If there's any more questions, we'd be happy to address those. But I think Michelle will make this presentation available to our partners in Bangladesh, and you can take it. And if there's any questions in the future, feel free to talk to us. We'll be discussing this maybe again on a future Skype call.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. So I'd like to open up the mics for any questions that people would like to ask live. The Canadians can jump in by pressing *4 to unmute themselves to speak, and then when you're done, do *4 again. I'm going to open up now the broadcast for everybody. However, the Canadians, I would ask you not to click the button Start Broadcasting. For people in Bangladesh, when I actually allow people to broadcast, on your screen, on the left-hand side, you will see at the top left-hand side a box with your name and a button that says Start Broadcasting. Perhaps before that, you may have another box that will open to ask to activate your camera and your microphone. You can click yes to that, and then when you see the Start Broadcasting button, just above that you'll see there's a little camera with a red bar through it, or if there's no red bar, just click on it and a red bar will appear, because we don't need to have your camera. And next to that there's another little icon which is like a little speaker. So you want to click on that to have the red bar, which means your microphone is off, and to turn your microphone on, click on the icon again, and you'll be able to activate your microphone. Okay? So what I ask is that you keep your microphone off by having the red bar if you're not speaking, and when you want to speak, just click on it to turn it on. So again, that prevents us from having background noise from people who are not speaking. So I'm turning it on right this second. So you should see on your screen now a new icon. So I would welcome you to turn on your microphones in Bangladesh if you would like to speak. Of course, the chat function is always available, and you can certainly type any questions or comments you have in the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and you press send to send your message to everybody. So I hope this is working for everyone. So we'll open it up for questions at this point. Anybody has questions or comments?
Maybe, Michelle, it was just, it needs a little time for maybe our partners to review, and maybe there will be questions later on.
That's possible. I know it can take a few, like a minute or so for people to actually activate their microphone, so I want to also give enough time for them to click on the proper settings. Okay, so I'm not hearing from anybody, and there's nothing in the type box. So it's already 1 minute past 11, so if there are no questions, then I would like to thank everybody. Oh, I see somebody with a camera on, so you don't really need your camera. That's Najmul, I think. So Najmul, you can certainly speak in your microphone if you want to ask a question or talk live. Okay, I think Najmul closed his broadcasting now. Okay, so now I would like to end the webinar at this time. So I'd like to thank everybody for your participation, and particularly the whole team that developed this presentation. I will be making this available by email, by sending the link early next week or at the end of today if it's ready. It takes a little while for the system to generate the recording, and we certainly will be able to talk about this later in the future. So thank you, everybody, and we'll be terminating the presentation now.